I've always enjoyed the local farmers market, especially when it takes place at night. There's something about the glow of the string lights, the hum of chatter, and the smell of fresh produce that feels magical. One particular Friday night, I decided to take a stroll through the market after a long week at work. Little did I know, this seemingly innocuous decision would lead me into a chilling experience that still haunts me. The market was bustling with people. Stalls lined the narrow paths, displaying an array of colorful fruits, vegetables, and homemade goods. I wandered aimlessly, enjoying the lively atmosphere and sampling various treats. As I reached for an apple from one of the stands, I felt a strange sensation, like someone was watching me. I brushed it off, thinking I was just being paranoid. I continued to meander through the market, stopping occasionally to chat with the vendors. At one point, I noticed a man standing a few stalls away, staring directly at me. He was tall, with dark hair and a scruffy beard, dressed in a worn-out jacket. His intense gaze made me uncomfortable, so I quickly moved on, hoping to lose him in the crowd. But as I navigated through the market, I kept seeing him out of the corner of my eye. He seemed to appear wherever I went, maintaining his distance but never breaking his stare. I tried to ignore him, convincing myself that it was just a coincidence. After all, it was a public market, and people were bound to cross paths multiple times. The feeling of unease grew stronger as the night wore on. I decided to head towards the exit, hoping to shake off the eerie sensation. As I made my way out, I glanced back and saw the man still following me. My heart pounded in my chest, and I quickened my pace, desperately wanting to put some distance between us. Once outside the market, I felt a slight sense of relief. The streets were less crowded, and the cool night air helped calm my nerves. I headed towards my car, parked a few blocks away, constantly looking over my shoulder to make sure I wasn't being followed. Just as I reached my car, I saw him again. He was standing under a streetlight, his face partially obscured by the shadows. Panic surged through me as I fumbled with my keys, trying to unlock the door as quickly as possible. I managed to get inside and lock the doors, my hands trembling as I started the engine. I drove off, glancing in my rearview mirror to make sure he wasn't following me. The streets were empty, and there was no sign of the man. I breathed a sigh of relief, thinking the ordeal was finally over. The next morning, I tried to put the unsettling experience behind me. I went about my day as usual, but the memory of the man's intense stare lingered in my mind. That night, as I prepared for bed, I double-checked all the locks on my doors and windows, just to be safe. I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of rustling outside my bedroom window. My heart raced as I lay still, straining to hear any other noises. There it was again, a faint rustling, like someone was moving through the bushes. I gathered my courage and slowly got out of bed, creeping toward the window. I peeked through the curtains and saw a figure standing in my backyard, partially hidden by the darkness. It was the same man from the market. He was just standing there, staring up at my window. Fear gripped me as I realized this wasn't a coincidence. He had followed me home. I quickly backed away from the window and grabbed my phone to call the police. My hands trembled as I explained the situation to the dispatcher. They assured me that an officer would be dispatched to my location immediately. Minutes felt like hours as I waited for the police to arrive. I kept checking the window, but the man hadn't moved. When I finally saw the flashing lights of the police car, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. The officers searched my yard and the surrounding area but found no trace of the man. They took my statement and promised to keep an eye on the neighborhood. The next few days were a blur of anxiety and fear. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, constantly looking over my shoulder and jumping at every little noise. I installed security cameras around my house and made sure to always lock my doors and windows. Despite my precautions, the sense of dread never fully left me. One evening, as I reviewed the footage from my security cameras, I noticed something disturbing. The man had returned. The footage showed him lurking around my property, always staying just out of sight. He seemed to know exactly where the cameras were placed, avoiding them with an eerie precision. I showed the footage to the police, but without any clear evidence of a crime, there was little they could do. They increased patrols in my area and advised me to be cautious, but their reassurances did little to ease my fear. The stalking continued, each encounter more terrifying than the last. One night, I came home to find a note taped to my front door. It simply read, "I'm watching you." My blood ran cold as I read the message, realizing just how close he had gotten. I decided to stay with a friend for a few days, hoping that a change of location would deter him. But even at my friend's house, I couldn't escape the feeling of being watched. I kept the curtains drawn and rarely ventured outside, my paranoia growing with each passing day. Eventually, I returned home, determined not to let fear control my life. But the harassment continued. I would find small, unsettling signs that he had been there. Footprints in the mud outside my window, a cigarette butt on my porch, a faint knock on my door in the middle of the night. One particularly stormy night, the power went out, plunging my house into darkness. I lit some candles and tried to remain calm, but the flickering light only added to my unease. I sat in my living room, clutching my phone, ready to call the police at the slightest hint of danger. Suddenly, I heard a faint tapping on the window. My heart pounded as I slowly turned to look. There, illuminated by the candlelight, was the man's face pressed against the glass, his eyes locked onto mine. I screamed and stumbled back, my phone slipping from my grasp. I scrambled to pick it up and dialed 911, my voice shaking as I told the dispatcher what was happening. They assured me that officers were on their way, but I knew it would be several minutes before they arrived. I grabbed a kitchen knife and backed into a corner, my eyes never leaving the window. The man continued to stare, a sinister smile spreading across his face. I could see his breath fogging up the glass, the only barrier between us. The sound of sirens in the distance finally broke the spell. The man's expression changed to one of anger, and he disappeared into the night. When the police arrived, they searched the area but once again found no trace of him. Days turned into weeks, and the encounters became less frequent. I started to believe that maybe he had moved on, found another victim to terrorize. But the fear never truly left me. Every time I stepped outside, I felt his eyes on me. Every time I heard a noise in the night, I wondered if he had returned. I decided to move, hoping that a new location would bring me some peace. I found a small apartment in a busy part of town, far from the quiet suburbs. The constant activity and noise were a welcome distraction, and I slowly began to rebuild my life. But even in my new home, the memories of those encounters haunted me. I still checked my windows and doors obsessively, still scanned every crowd for his face. I knew that he was out there somewhere, and the thought kept me on edge. One day, as I was walking home from work, I felt a familiar sensation, the feeling of being watched. I quickened my pace, glancing around nervously. There, across the street, I saw him. He was standing in the shadows, his eyes fixed on me. Panic surged through me as I realized that no matter where I went, I could never escape him. He would always be there, lurking in the darkness, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The nightmare was far from over, and I knew that I would have to live with the fear for the rest of my life.